Welcome back to another edition of Hammer Down Ranked, where we rank the albums of some of my favourite bands. It's been a big week for Hammer Down. We've just announced Esoterica to play Hammer Down 2024 featuring Parallax Orchestra, who are the same people that worked with Mr. Tremonti in his band Alter Bridge at the Royal Albert Hall. So that's pretty cool. But enough about that. You clicked on this video today to talk about Tremonti. I'm ranking the 5 albums that Mark Tremonti's put out with his solo project. So Mark Tremonti, guitarist, most famous of course for Creed and Alter Bridge, had spent a lot of time recording and writing songs that didn't really fit with either band. So he decided, they were too good to go to waste. So he formed the Tremonti Project, as it was called at the time. Of course, now we all just know it as Tremonti. So I've always been a fan of Mark's work. I'm not the biggest Creed fan, but Alter Bridge, they're one of my favourite bands ever. I love Alter Bridge. And Tremonti's solo stuff was always the heavier, darker, more riff-based version of Alter Bridge. All of the stuff that was a little bit too heavy for the other two bands, they fit perfectly into his solo project. And the other thing is, Mark Tremonti's voice is way too good to go to waste. So in the solo project, obviously he gets the chance to show off what he can do, which is pretty good. For the project, he roped in Eric Friedman and Garrett Whitlock from Submersed, a band that Mark had worked with as well, more on the production side rather than actually being in the band. Now, the reason that we are ranking these albums today, I made a point in the last video about how we were probably only going to rank bands that were finished, so that way the videos are still valid in a year's time and the band hasn't dropped a new album. Probably safe to say that right now we're not going to be getting too much from Tremonti because Alter Bridge is busy, Creed are now back and touring again, and of course Mark's been doing some really special work recording Frank Sinatra songs and releasing albums to support Down syndrome's charities over in the States, as one of his children has Down syndrome. So that's a very special project that he's obviously been putting a lot of time into. So it's probably fair to say Tremonti aren't going to be releasing anything anytime soon, if ever. Which obviously I would much prefer them to come back and release a 6th album. So in number 5, we have the last record from Tremonti, 2021's Marching in Time. So Marching in Time was recorded by Michael Basquette, the same guy who's worked on all of the Tremonti albums, who's recorded a lot of work for similar bands like Seven Dust, Alter Bridge, Projected, Cold Rain, Miles Kennedy's solo record, and Mammoth Wolfgang Van Halen as well, which is cool. So this album made it to number 45 in the UK and number 184 in the US Billboard 200 charts, and features some pretty amazing songs. Now and Forever features some unbelievable guitar riffs. We're talking next level stuff. And If Not For You, which is almost like a kind of heavy ballad, I suppose, is one of the most beautiful songs Tremonti has ever released. Now, although this album is clearly a fine-tuned machine, definitely features some of Mark's best ever vocals, some of the most experimental riffs and song structures that they've had in any of their records, I can't really put my finger on why it's my least favourite of the albums. And let's be really clear, with Tremonti there are no bad albums. All 5 are epic, but one had to come in last. And I don't know, I feel like there's less standout tracks on this album than on some of the earlier stuff. And that's all it is. Still an amazing record, you should still listen to it, but moving on. Now the other 4 was all incredibly tight and it was really hard to pick. But we're going number 4 with 2015's Cauterize. So this was the first album to feature a very special individual, Mr. Wolfgang Van Halen, who has obviously gone on to release some incredible albums of his own. But before that, he did 2 records with Tremonti. And this was the first one. So it made it to number 23 in the UK album charts. Couldn't find it charting in the US. I don't know if it did or not, but I couldn't find that information. So this album kicks off with Radical Change. An absolute belter right off the bat. Heavy song. And this was a theme throughout the rest of the Tremonti records from this point onwards. They start with some heavy riffs. Then you've got other songs on there like Flying Monkeys, which is a very different song for them. The chorus is way slower, more melodic, some really beautiful vocal harmonies in that chorus. And of course the single for the album, Another Heart, absolute belter of a song, beautiful piece of work. And of course the soaring song Sympathy, which is an absolute beauty. The chorus on that is stunning. At number 3 we have 2018's A Dying Machine. Now this album, a little bit more of a concept record. There's actually a novel that comes alongside the album, which is pretty pretty cool. This album reached 57 in the US charts and 19 here in the UK, so it did pretty well. The record opens with another heavy track, Bringer of War. Pretty intense start to the record. Songs like Take You With Me, which has got a really beautiful video that accompanies it, one of the singles for the record. A lot like Sin, and my personal favourite, As the Silence Becomes Me. What an unbelievable piece of work. That's like a 5.5 minute epic, real tune that. But there's also an absolutely epic bonus track which you may or may not have heard, Now or Never, which is actually one of my favourite Tremonti songs ever. It's an absolute beast of a song and it's a bonus track on the album. So this record definitely deserves its place as my number 3. But before we do the top 2 on this week's Hammer Down Ranked, we're going to talk about the shirt in this video, a band called One Last Day. So One Last Day, they're a hard rock band from Berkshire, just outside of Reading. Incredible band. They released their debut record in 2021, Chapter 1, The End is Beginning, which you can go and listen to now. But personally, I think the stuff that they've done more recently is just on another level. Songs like No Chemical, absolute belter. But my personal favourite, It's a Sin, Don't Give Up. That song is awesome. Really catchy chorus in particular that gets me about that song. They've just done a tour with US band Pistols at Dawn and all around the south of the UK, and they've got a lot of big stuff coming in 2024. So check them out. One Last Day, awesome band. I'm going to leave some links obviously in the description of this video. But back to the reason for this video, we're going to get to the top 2 records from Tremonti. So this has been a tough one. And number 2, the debut record, All I Was, 2012. How this record was a debut album, it is just beyond me. All I can really put it down to is the fact that Mark said on the lead up to this record, he'd been writing stuff for ages that just didn't fit with either band. And so it probably had years worth of his best songs all put into that one record. You know, with other albums, you're always on a couple of year cycle creating your next album. But all I can imagine is All I Was put together over years, I suppose, of songs that Mark had written. Now, it reached 29 in the US Billboard charts. It didn't chart over here in the UK. Now, as I mentioned at the start of the video, the Tremonti Project was really an opportunity for Mark to do his own thing, write the heavier riffs, use his vocal prowess, which he very much has in his arsenal, and just allow him to have complete creative freedom. So we'd previously heard his voice on Alter Bridge's Words Darker Than Their Wings off of AB3, the 2010 album. But other than that, Mark's only ever done the backing vocals when it comes to Alter Bridge. So the first time hearing him take the centre stage with the All I Was record. So the singles, So You're Afraid and You Waste Your Time, insanely heavy. Music videos recorded in a studio with the 4 of the members. I mean, this is the first time we really get to hear what he's capable of as a solo project. And those 2 singles are huge. The album starts with Leave It Alone, a far more melodic song. This is the first and last time that we ever hear Tremonti open with one of the softer songs on the record. The rest of it is intense, and as we know, all of the rest of the album start with something way heavier. Songs like Proof and Brains are some of my other favourites, but my personal favourite song from this album is the song that it finishes with, Decay. An absolute monster tune. It's got a really catchy chorus, a massive set of riffs that run all the way through. Great piece of work. And also slight honourable mention to 2 other, I guess, B-sides from that era, Gone and All That I've Got. Now those 2 songs are actually my 2 favourite Tremonti songs ever, and they're not even on the album. So they don't count towards this record's place as number 2, but just a little side mention, if you haven't heard those B-sides, Gone and All That I Got, you need to get those in your ear holes immediately because they are some of the most awesome songs ever. Now, Tremonti to me has given me a lot of real good times. Driving 4 hours to Download Festival every year, seeing Tremonti there a couple of times between 2015 and 2019 were the years that I went. Every year on the car journey on the way up, we'd be blasting in the sun as we're driving along, Gone, All That I Got, this whole album really, and some of the songs on the later albums too. Some great times. I love this band. But anyway, the final album, number 1, 2016's Dust. Now, Dust was recorded at the same time as Cauterize, which is why they're only a year apart. And it also probably explains why the album arts are fairly similar. You've got that face, you know, on both records. This was also the last album with Wolfgang Van Halen. He joined just for Cauterize and Dust and went off to do his own stuff, which is also quite good. And when I say quite, I mean very. Now, this record actually was the highest charting album that Tremonti ever put out. 16 here in the UK and 34 in the US. The record starts with the song My Last Mistake. Great tune, fantastic opener for the record. My favourite ones, Tore My Heart Out, incredible chorus. The guitar solo on Dust has to get a very special mention. I mean, that's one of the best solos probably ever. Certainly one of the best that I know. But my favourite song from the album, Betray Me, that chorus is lethal. Soaring vocals, really great harmonies as well. Fantastic song. So, there you have it. 2016's Dust, my number one. Let me know in the comments what album you think is the best album from Tremonti. And fingers crossed we get something from Tremonti in the future. Who knows? I mean, I'd much rather my video was wrong and it wasn't the final list of Tremonti. I definitely would prefer to have another Tremonti record. But if not, is this the definitive list? What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Like, subscribe, all that jazz. Help this channel grow as much as possible. We'll see you in the next episode.